hunger, health, education, living conditions, human rights, freedom, corruption, pollution. Poverty is about more than just income. Following Amartya Sen's theories, poverty is not just insufficient income, but a much more complex phenomenon. It is the lack of liberties, rights, and capabilities. At Ethos Foundation, the think tank that I had the privilege to lead up until a year ago, we decided to create an index to measure poverty under this viewpoint in 8 Latin American countries. The idea was not only to get a more comprehensive and, in our view, realistic vision of poverty, but also contribute to identify policy tools that can help alleviating poverty from a much broader perspective. The Ethos Poverty Index is obtained from the simple average of 2 components. First, household poverty, and the second is contextual poverty. Household poverty considers the variables that have traditionally been taken into account in poverty measures: income, education, potable water and sanitation services, housing conditions, cooking fuel, and electricity. The data in this case was taken from the official statistics institutes in each of the countries analyzed. On the other hand, the contextual poverty is the most innovative contribution of this work. It considers public health, institutions, economy, democracy, human rights and freedom, public safety, gender, and environment. The inclusion of contextual variables obeys not only to their extremely important role in this broader concept of poverty and for achieving overall human well-being, but also to set the right atmosphere to overcome poverty under its traditional definition. Let's look now at the rankings. Here is the household poverty ranking, the one we would get by using the traditional variables. And it is very interesting to see the effect of contextual variables, because once we consider them, the position in the Ethos Poverty Index ranking of Mexico, Brazil, Venezuela, and Colombia does change. Here we can see the difference. The Venezuelan case is particularly noteworthy. This country stepped down 2 places from the household ranking to the Ethos Poverty Index because of its poor performance in many of the contextual variables, particularly institutions, democracy, freedom of speech, and crime. To just mention one of these issues and to put it into context, crime in Venezuela, the homicide rate in Venezuela is 17 times more than in Peru, which is the country with the least number of homicides in the group of countries analyzed. And homicides and crime in Venezuela are actually greater than in countries with a much worse reputation for it, like Mexico and Colombia. While Venezuela went down 2 places because of its poor performance in the contextual variables, the opposite happened with Colombia. Colombia, as you will know, in the past had serious problems regarding human rights and public safety. And during the past few years, they have made significant progress consolidating democracy, security, and human rights overall. And that's why Colombia improved its position on the Ethos Poverty Index, because precisely of its good performance in some of the most important contextual variables. Now let's go and take a look of the bottom of the ranking. Bolivia holds the worst position in both the household and the contextual poverty variables. Public health is one of the most pressing issues in Bolivia. In this country, life expectancy is only 63.5 years, whereas in Chile, the country with the best performance in the Ethos Poverty Index, life expectancy is 13 years longer. and infant mortality rate is 6 times lower than that of Bolivia. Brazil actually climbed one place if we consider the household poverty with the Ethos Poverty Index because of its good performance in the contextual variables, particularly institutions and democracy. An example of it could be mentioned the fact that then President Lula decided not to amend the constitution to allow an additional re-election despite having a huge popularity. On the contrary, Ecuador, my home country, holds the same, the 7th position in both the household and the contextual poverty rankings. In the contextual variables, it is fragile institutions, the lack of respect for democracy and freedom of speech, some of the things that contribute the most to this outcome. An example of this is the video that I will show, having President Rafael Correa expressing his particular way of understanding democracy.
Escúchenme bien, el presidente de la República no es solo jefe del poder ejecutivo, es jefe de todo el Estado ecuatoriano. Y el Estado ecuatoriano es poder ejecutivo, poder legislativo, poder judicial, poder electoral, poder de transparencia y control social, superintendencias, procuraduría, contraloría, todo eso es el Estado ecuatoriano.
I think this speaks for itself. A further example of President Correa's insulting and intolerant style, a taste of which we actually saw in the morning, was the way he called me because he didn't like the results of the Ethos Poverty Index. This is what President Correa said during a televised address. Now, despite the fact that in most of Latin America, the old left and right-wing divide is still current, and most countries actually are still trapped by this discussion, one of the most interesting findings of the Ethos Poverty Index is that defeating poverty under this broader perspective has nothing to do with being in one side or the other. Chile, which was governed for 2 decades by the left up until 2 years ago, is the #1 country in the Ethos Index. Brazil has also been governed by the left for 10 years, and it holds the 2nd position. But Venezuela, Ecuador, and Bolivia, also governed by the left, reflect the worst performance in this index. So what this means is that effectively alleviating poverty is not a matter of being on the right or the left. It is a matter of responsible governments. And I think that's the new paradigm that we should apply in political activity. Actually, I have personally decided to go from crafting ideas to action, promoting what we call the responsible government model as a new ideological vision for the political movement that we are creating in my home country, Ecuador, aimed at overcoming poverty seen as a lack of rights, freedom, and capabilities, something that I think that not only Ecuador, but all of Latin America have a great potential of achieving. Thank you.